Accidental love with an alien. Imagine walking home one night and seeing a strange, glowing light in the sky, only to discover it's not a plane, not a star, but something alien. When Jake Miller stumbled upon Luma, a silver-haired traveler from another world, his life changed forever. Hunted by shadowy figures across galaxies, Luma carried a secret that could save worlds or destroy them. But as Jake fought to protect her, he discovered a connection that would bind them together in ways he never imagined. This is a story of accidental love, unimaginable danger, and a bond that defies the stars. Ready to dive in? Let's begin. Story begins as... It was a crisp October evening when Jake Miller first saw the light in the sky. He was walking home from his part-time job at the local diner, his headphones blasting his favorite indie playlist, when a strange, pulsating glow caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just a plane or maybe a drone, but the way it moved was wrong. It wasn't smooth or mechanical. It flickered and danced like a firefly on steroids. Jake froze, his breath visible in the chilly air, and pulled off his headphones. The faint hum of the town at night, the distant rumble of cars, the rustle of leaves, was suddenly replaced by an eerie silence. The light grew brighter, descending slowly until it hovered just above the trees in the park. Jake's heart raced as he stared at it, his mind scrambling for a logical explanation. A meteor? A satellite? But it didn't look like anything he'd ever seen before. It was too controlled, too deliberate. Then, with a soft whoosh, the light vanished, leaving behind a faint shimmer in the air, like heat waves on a summer day. Curiosity got the better of him. Jake crept toward the park, his sneakers crunching on the fallen leaves. The air felt heavier now, charged with an energy he couldn't explain. As he approached the spot where the light had been, he saw her. She was lying on the ground, her silver hair fanned out like a halo, her skin glowing faintly under the moonlight. Her clothes, if you could call them that, were made of some shimmering material that seemed to shift colors as she moved, like oil on water. She looked up at him with wide, almond-shaped eyes that glowed a soft, ethereal blue. Jake's mouth went dry. "Are you okay?" he stammered, his voice trembling. The girl, no, the being, smiled weakly. Her lips were a pale lavender, and when she spoke, her voice was melodic but urgent. "I need your help," she said, her words carrying a strange, almost musical quality. "They're coming." Jake blinked, his mind struggling to process what was happening. "Who's coming?" Before she could answer, a low hum filled the air, and the ground beneath them began to vibrate. Jake stumbled, catching himself on a nearby tree. The girl's eyes widened in fear, and she reached out to him. Her hand was warm, almost electric, sending a strange tingling sensation up his arm. "Run," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing hum. Jake didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed her hand, pulling her to her feet. She was lighter than he expected, as if gravity didn't fully apply to her. Together, they sprinted through the park, the hum growing louder behind them. Jake glanced over his shoulder and saw shadowy figures emerging from the trees, their forms flickering like static on an old TV. Who are they? Jake panted as they reached the edge of the park. "Hunters," the girl replied, her voice strained. "They've been chasing me. If they catch me, they'll take me back, or worse." Jake's mind reeled. Hunters? Chasing her? From where? But there was no time to ask questions. The figures were gaining on them, their movements unnaturally fast. Jake tightened his grip on the girl's hand and veered toward the street, his apartment only a few blocks away. "What's your name?" he asked as they ran, desperate for something to ground him in this surreal moment. "Luma," she replied, her glowing eyes meeting his for a brief moment. "And you?" "Jake," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Luma smiled faintly, her expression a mix of gratitude and fear. "Thank you, Jake." As they reached his apartment building, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed forever. But little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would take him far beyond the stars and reveal a secret that would change everything. Jake led Luma up the narrow staircase to his small apartment above the diner. His heart was still pounding from the chase, and his mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? And who, or what, were those hunters? He fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking, before finally unlocking the door. The apartment was small and cluttered, with mismatched furniture, a few band posters on the walls, and a half-eaten pizza on the coffee table. Jake glanced around, suddenly self-conscious. It's not much, but it's safe. Or well, it's supposed to be. Luma stepped inside, her movements graceful and almost floating. Her glowing eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. The shimmering fabric of her clothes seemed to catch the light, casting soft reflections on the walls. She turned to Jake, her expression calm but curious. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice like a gentle breeze. "I didn't know where else to go." Jake closed the door behind them, locking it securely. He leaned against it, trying to catch his breath. "Okay, seriously, who are you? And what are you?" Luma hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. She seemed to be choosing her words carefully. "I'm not from here," she admitted. "I'm from a place far away, a world you've never heard of. I came here to escape them." "Them," Jake repeated, his mind racing. "You mean those shadowy things? The hunters?" Luma nodded. "They've been chasing me across galaxies. If they catch me, they'll take me back, or worse." Jake stared at her, trying to wrap his head around what she was saying. Galaxies? Hunters? This was all too much, but he couldn't stop now. He had no more. "Why are they after you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Luma's glowing eyes met his, and for a moment, she looked almost vulnerable. "Because of what I carry," she said. "Something they want. Something powerful." Before Jake could ask what she meant, a loud thud echoed from outside. He rushed to the window, his heart pounding. Below, in the alley, shadowy figures moved with unnatural speed, their forms flickering like static on an old TV. "They've found me," Luma whispered, her voice trembling. Jake turned to her, his fear giving way to determination. "We need to get out of here. Now." Luma nodded, her expression resolute. "There's a place we can go. A sanctuary. But we'll have to move quickly." Jake grabbed his backpack from the couch, shoving in a few essentials: a water bottle, some snacks, and a flashlight. He hesitated for a moment, then grabbed the pocket knife he kept in the drawer. It wasn't much, but it made him feel a little safer. "Where are we going?" he asked as he slung the backpack over his shoulder. "The mountains," Luma replied. "There's a spot there where the energy between worlds is strongest. If we can reach it, I can activate the Starstone and open a portal to my homeworld." Jake frowned. The Starstone. Luma reached into the folds of her shimmering clothes and pulled out a small, glowing crystal. Its light pulsed like a heartbeat, casting soft shadows on the walls. Jake stared at it, mesmerized by its beauty. "This is the Starstone," Luma explained. "It's the source of my power and the reason they're after me." Jake's eyes widened. "What does it do?" "It can open portals to other worlds," Loomis said. "But it's also incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. If the hunters get it, they could use it to destroy entire planets." Jake's stomach churned. "We can't let that happen." Luma nodded. "That's why I need your help. I can't do this alone." Jake took a deep breath, his mind racing. This was insane. Absolutely insane. But as he looked at Luma, at her glowing eyes and the determination in her expression, he knew he couldn't walk away. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's do this." Luma smiled, a flicker of relief crossing her face. "Thank you, Jake." As they slipped out the back door and into the night, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a sharp turn into the unknown. But one thing was certain: he was in this now, and there was no turning back. The night air was cold and sharp as Jake and Luma sprinted through the empty streets, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The shadowy figures, the hunters, were close behind, their movements unnaturally fast and fluid. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, each breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the hunters gaining ground, their flickering forms almost blending into the darkness. "Who are they?" Jake gasped, his voice barely audible over the sound of their footsteps. "Hunters," Luma replied, her melodic voice strained but steady. They've been chasing me across galaxies. If they catch me, they'll take me back, or worse. Jake's mind raced. Galaxies? Hunters? This was all too much, but he couldn't stop now. He had to keep moving. What do they want from you? The Starstone, Loomis said, her glowing eyes flickering with fear. It's the source of my power. If they get it, they'll use it to destroy worlds. Jake's stomach churned. Destroy worlds? This was way bigger than he'd imagined. We can't let that happen, he said firmly, his voice tinged with determination. Luma nodded, her silver hair catching the moonlight as they turned a corner. We need to find shelter, somewhere they can't follow. Jake thought quickly. There's an old warehouse a few blocks from here. It's abandoned. We can hide there. Luma glanced at him, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude. Lead the way. They darted through the narrow alleyways, the hunter's low hum growing louder behind them. Jake's legs burned, but he pushed through the pain, focusing on the sound of Luma's footsteps beside him. Finally, they reached the warehouse, its rusted doors creaking as they slipped inside. The interior was dark and damp, with broken machinery and stacks of old crates scattered across the floor. Jake grabbed a metal pipe from the ground, his hands shaking as he gripped it tightly. Luma stood beside him, her glowing eyes scanning the darkness. Stay close, Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. The hunters burst in moments later, their forms shifting and blurring as they moved. Jake swung the pipe at the nearest one, but it passed right through as if they were made of smoke. They're not solid, Jake shouted, panic rising in his voice. Luma stepped forward, her hands glowing brighter. Let me handle this. With a wave of her hand, a burst of light erupted from her fingertips, sending the hunters stumbling back. But it wasn't enough. They regrouped quickly, their glowing eyes fixed on Luma. We need to go. Luma grabbed Jake's hand, and together they ran deeper into the warehouse, searching for another way out. There's a door in the back, Jake said, his voice urgent. It leads to the forest. If we can make it there, we might lose them. Luma nodded, her expression determined. Let's move. They weaved through the maze of crates and machinery, the hunters close behind. Jake's heart raced as they reached the back door, but it was locked. He yanked on the handle, his hands trembling. Stand back, Loomis said, her voice calm but firm. She placed her hand on the door, and a soft glow spread from her fingertips. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. Jake stared at her, amazed. How did you— No time, Luma interrupted, pulling him through the door. They emerged into the cool night air, the forest looming ahead. The hunters were still behind them, but the trees offered some cover. Jake and Luma ran, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth. As they reached a small clearing, Luma stopped, her glowing eyes scanning the area. This way, she said, pointing to a narrow path. Jake followed, his mind racing with questions. Luma, how do you know where to go? The Starstone, she replied, holding up the glowing crystal. It guides me, but we have to keep moving. They're still coming. Jake nodded, his determination hardening. Then let's go. As they disappeared into the forest, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. But for now, they were safe, or at least safer than they had been. The hunters were relentless, but so was Jake. He wasn't going to let them win. Not now. Not ever. Jake and Luma stumbled through the dense forest, the moonlight filtering through the trees, casting eerie shadows on the ground. The hunters' low hum had faded into the distance, but neither of them dared to slow down. Jake's legs ached, and his breath came in short, ragged gasps, but he pushed through the exhaustion. Luma moved gracefully beside him, her glowing skin and shimmering clothes making her look like a creature from a dream. Finally, they reached a small clearing, surrounded by towering trees and a quiet stream. Jake collapsed onto a fallen log, his chest heaving. I think we lost them, he panted, wiping sweat from his brow. Luma stood nearby, her glowing eyes scanning the darkness. For now, she said softly, but they won't stop. They'll keep coming. Jake looked up at her, his mind still reeling from everything that had happened. Luma, you need to tell me everything. Who are you really? And why are they after you? Luma hesitated, her expression conflicted. She sat down beside him, the soft glow of her skin illuminating the space between them. I'm a traveler, she began, her voice melodic but tinged with sadness. My people have the ability to move between worlds, to explore the universe. But not everyone approves of what we do. The hunters, they believe we're a threat. They want to capture us, to control our power. Jake frowned, trying to make sense of it all. But why you? What's so special about you? Luma reached into the folds of her shimmering clothes and pulled out the starstone. The small crystal pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, casting a warm glow on her face. This, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's the source of my power and the reason they're after me. Jake stared at the crystal, mesmerized by its beauty. What does it do? It can open portals to other worlds, Luma explained. But it's also incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. If the hunters get it, they could use it to destroy entire planets. Jake's eyes widened. Destroy planets? That's insane. Luma nodded, her expression grim. That's why I can't let them have it. I have to get it back to my homeworld, where we'll be safe. Jake ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. Okay, so how we do that? How do we get you home? Luma's glowing eyes met his. And for the first time, Jake saw a flicker of hope in them. There's a place in the mountains, she said. A spot where the energy between worlds is strongest. If we can get there, I can activate the starstone and open a portal. Jake nodded, his determination hardening. Then that's where we'll go. But what about the hunters? They'll be watching us. We'll have to be careful, Luma replied. But we don't have a choice. It's the only way. Jake took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Okay, let's do this. Luma smiled faintly, her gratitude evident. Thank you, Jake. I couldn't do this without you. Jake felt a strange warmth in his chest at her words. Hey, what are friends for, right? Luma's smile widened, and for a moment, the weight of their situation seemed to lift. But the moment was short-lived. A distant rustling in the trees made them both freeze. Did you hear that? Jake whispered, his voice tense. Luma's glowing eyes narrowed as she scanned the darkness. We need to keep moving. Jake nodded, his heart pounding. Lead the way. As they set off again, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The forest seemed alive with unseen eyes, and every shadow felt like a threat. But he pushed the fear aside, focusing on Luma's glowing form ahead of him. They had a mission now, and failure wasn't an option. The hunters were relentless, but so was Jake. He wasn't going to let them win. Not now. Not ever. Jake sat on the cold, rocky ground of the mountaintop, staring at his glowing hand. The faint shimmer pulsed softly, like a heartbeat, reminding him of Luma and the Starstone. Her holographic message played over and over in his mind. Asterisk, I'll come back for you. Keep the light alive. Asterisk, he didn't know how long he stayed there, lost in thought. But eventually, the first rays of sunlight began to peek over the horizon. The warmth of the rising sun brought him back to reality. He stood up, his legs stiff and aching, and took one last look at the spot where Luma had disappeared. I'll be ready, he whispered to the empty air, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. The journey back down the mountain was quiet and uneventful. Jake's mind raced with questions. What did it mean to be connected to the Starstone? Would Luma really come back? And what about the hunters? Were they gone for good, or would they return? By the time he reached his apartment, exhaustion had taken over. He collapsed onto the couch, his glowing hand resting on his chest. The faint pulse of light was strangely comforting, a reminder that he wasn't alone. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after meeting an alien and helping her escape intergalactic hunters. What is it? What's wrong? Luma hesitated, her glowing gaze dropping to his hand. The Starstone, it didn't just leave a part of itself with you. It bonded with you, Jake. You're connected to it now, and that means you're connected to me. Jake stared at her, his mind racing. What does that mean? Am I like you now? Luma shook her head. Not exactly, but the Starstone's energy is part of you. It gives you a connection to my world and to the hunters. Jake's stomach churned. The hunters? Are they coming back? Luma's expression darkened. They never stopped looking for the Starstone. And now that they know it's connected to you, they'll come for you too. Jake felt a cold wave of fear wash over him. What do we do? Luma reached out and took his hand, her touch warm and electric. We fight, she said firmly. Together. But we need to be careful. The hunters are stronger than ever, and they won't stop until they get what they want. Jake nodded, his determination hardening. Then we'll stop them. Whatever it takes. Luma smiled, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Jake. I knew I could count on you. As they stood there, hand in hand, Jake felt a strange sense of calm. The road ahead would be dangerous, but he wasn't alone. He had Luma, and together, they could face anything. But as they stepped out into the night, a low hum filled the air, and the ground beneath them began to vibrate. Jake's heart raced as he turned to Luma. They're here, aren't they? Luma's glowing eyes met his, her expression grim. Yes, and this time we finish it. Jake tightened his grip on her hand, his glowing palm pulsing in sync with hers. Let's do this. The hunters appeared moments later, their forms flickering like static on an old TV. They moved with unnatural speed, surrounding Jake and Luma in a matter of seconds. Jake's mind raced, but he pushed the fear aside. He wasn't the same person he'd been when this all started. He was stronger now, braver, and he wasn't going to let the hunters win. Luma raised the Starstone, its light growing brighter and brighter until it filled the entire street. Ready? She asked, her voice steady. Jake nodded, his glowing hand clenched into a fist. Ready? As the hunters lunged, Jake and Luma stood side by side, their connection to the Starstone pulsing with power. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, Jake felt like they had a chance. And he wasn't going to let it slip away. The street was eerily silent, the low hum of the hunters filling the air like a warning. Jake stood beside Luma, his glowing hand clenched into a fist, the pulse of the Starstone's energy syncing with his heartbeat. The hunters circled them, their flickering forms shifting and blurring, their glowing eyes locked onto Jake and Luma with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. Stay close, Luma whispered, her voice calm but firm. We do this together. Jake nodded, his jaw tight. I'm ready. The hunters lunged first, their movements swift and unpredictable. Jake swung his glowing fist, and this time it connected. The hunter he hit let out a sharp, static-like screech before dissolving into a cloud of shimmering particles. It works, Jake shouted, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. Luma raised the Starstone, its light growing brighter with every passing second. Focus, Jake. Don't let them distract you. Another hunter charged at Jake, but he sidestepped just in time, delivering a powerful blow that sent it crumbling into nothingness. Luma, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of light and energy, her movements graceful yet deadly. The Starstone's glow intensified, and with a wave of her hand, she sent a burst of energy that knocked 3 hunters back. But there were too many of them. For every hunter they took down, 2 more seemed to appear. Jake's arms ached, and his breath came in short, ragged gasps. Luma, we can't keep this up forever. Luma's glowing eyes met his, her expression resolute. We don't have to. We just need to buy enough time. Time for what? Jake asked, dodging another hunter's attack. For this, Luma said, holding the Starstone high above her head. The crystal's light exploded outward, illuminating the entire street in a blinding glow. Jake shielded his eyes, the energy from the Starstone washing over him like a wave. When the light faded, the hunters were gone. The street was silent once more, the only sound the distant hum of the city. Jake lowered his arm, his heart still racing. Did we do it? Luma smiled, but her expression was bittersweet. For now. But the hunters will regroup. They'll come back stronger. Jake frowned. Then what do we do? Luma stepped closer, her glowing eyes filled with determination. We close the portal, the one they've been using to come here. If we destroy it, they won't be able to return. Jake's eyes widened. Can we do that? Luma nodded. With the Starstone, yes. But it's dangerous. If we're not careful, it could destroy this world too. Jake took a deep breath, his mind racing. Then we'll be careful. We don't have a choice. Luma reached out and took his hand, her touch warm and reassuring. Thank you, Jake, for everything. Jake smiled faintly. Hey, what are friends for, right? Together, they made their way to the portal's location, a hidden cavern deep in the mountains. The air was thick with energy, the ground vibrating beneath their feet. The portal itself was a swirling vortex of light and shadow, its edges crackling with power. Luma held the starstone out in front of her, its glow intensifying as she focused her energy. This is it, she said, her voice steady. Once we destroy the portal, the hunters won't be able to return. But it's going to take everything we've got. Jake tightened his grip on her hand, his glowing palm pulsing in sync with hers. Then let's finish this. Luma nodded, her expression resolute. On 3. 1, 2, 3. They channeled the starstone's energy into the portal, the light growing brighter and brighter until it filled the entire cavern. The ground shook violently, and Jake felt a surge of energy unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Hold on, Luma shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar of the collapsing portal. Jake clenched his teeth, his entire body trembling from the strain. Just when he thought he couldn't hold on any longer, the portal exploded in a burst of light, sending a shockwave that knocked them both off their feet. When the dust settled, the portal was gone. The cavern was silent, the air still. Jake sat up slowly, his body aching but his heart filled with relief. We did it, he said, his voice hoarse. Luma smiled, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude. We did. But as they stood to leave, Jake noticed something strange. The starstone in Luma's hand was flickering, its light fading. Luma, he asked, his voice tinged with concern. Luma looked down at the starstone, her expression sad but accepting. It's done its job, she said softly. It's time for me to go. Jake's heart sank. Go? But you just got back. Luma reached out and touched his cheek, her hand warm against his skin. This isn't goodbye, Jake. The starstone's energy is part of you now. We'll always be connected. Tears welled in Jake's eyes as he realized what she meant. Promise you'll come back. Luma smiled, her glowing eyes filled with warmth. I promise. With that, she stepped back, her form beginning to dissolve into light. Jake watched as she faded away, the starstone's glow disappearing with her. But as he stood there, alone in the cavern, he noticed something. His hand was still glowing faintly, a reminder of the bond they shared. Jake smiled, a sense of hope filling his heart. Here is the story ends. If you enjoyed and want to watch more thrilling sci-fi adventures, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Dive into epic battles, explore distant galaxies, and join brave heroes as they fight for survival against impossible odds. Let us know in comments if you want next chapters to publish soon. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and become part of the journey. Together, we'll keep the last light burning. Subscribe now and let the adventure continue.